Jesus and his disciples left from there and began a journey through Galilee, but he did not wish anyone to know about it. He was teaching his disciples and telling them, "The Son of Man is to be handed over to men, and they will kill him. And 3 days after his death, the Son of Man will rise." But they did not understand what he was saying, and they were afraid to question him. When they came to Capernaum, and once inside the house, he began to ask them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they remained silent. They had been discussing among themselves on the way who was the greatest. Then he sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "If anyone wishes to be first, he shall be the last of all and the servant of all." Taking a child, he placed it in their midst, and putting his arms around it, he said to them, "Whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives not me, but the one who sent me." The Gospel of the Lord. Good afternoon. It is good for us to be here on this lovely day. In the gospel we just heard, Jesus predicts that he will be killed and rise again. The disciples do not understand. Instead, they are talking about which of them is the greatest. By the example of his own suffering and death, Jesus is trying to teach that the path to greatness in the kingdom of God leads downward, towards suffering, renouncing self and service, rather than upward, toward good reputation and glory. To teach the disciples, Jesus centers on a child, a person of the lowest status in that society. It is there, the lowest, the least, the lost, who are counted as greatest in the plan of Jesus. Jesus is teaching that the one who seems most vulnerable and needs the greatest amount of care can also be the one who has the most to teach us and about what it is most to be Christ-like and God-like. Teaching is the most human occupation there is. Just about all of us have been teachers to someone in one capacity or another. Anytime we share our knowledge or show somebody how to do something, we are teachers. I was a grade school teacher many years ago. When I look back, I really remember the poorest students, the ones who struggled, that didn't seem to have much going for them at the beginning. Seeing them catch on and begin to succeed, to me, was a greater pleasure than helping those who from the beginning had everything going for them and found school easy. We can think about how the benefit of love, care, and patience affects a rescue dog or cat we may take in and make part of our lives. In our jobs, we may be called upon to help new hires. We think about the greatest, we think about the least. I like to think about the old television show, The Honeymooners. Jackie Gleason and Art Carney were putting characters to life in the 1950s. And there was one example where Ed Norton gave one of the greatest examples of this I've ever heard. He said, "Be nice to people you meet on the way up, because you're going to meet them again on the way down." Jesus directs his disciples' attention to those who are most vulnerable and whose gifts are overlooked and least developed. The disciples are being called upon to turn to those of the lowest station, embrace them, and bring them into the circle. They are being asked to help the vulnerable, the poor, the weak, the struggling, those who may be hidden in the shadows. This church year until December 8th, we honor St. Joseph. St. Joseph can appear as a figure hidden in the shadows. Not much about St. Joseph is mentioned in the scriptures, yet he played a great role in the history of our salvation. St. Joseph was a protector of the vulnerable. He protected Mary. She could have been stoned to death for adultery in that time had St. Joseph not taken her into his home as his wife. He protected the infant, the child Jesus, who was seen as a threat to the authority of King Herod. King Herod wanted Jesus dead. In the gospel we just heard, Jesus is talking to the disciples who would have some power, prestige, and status in the circle of believers. He invites them to lead by giving up power and instead serve the most needy. Jesus leads his disciples to empower those who are forced into positions of servitude in society and place them at the center. This can be seen as a message of humility. Some years ago, I read a book by John Miller called The Christian Way. Miller talks about humility. Miller wrote, "Humility or poverty of spirit is not a matter of thinking low thoughts about ourselves. It is not a matter of groveling in the dust. It is simply a matter of knowing ourselves as we really are. And when we see ourselves as we really are, we will see that we are poor." How this relates to the gospel is that we can see ourselves as poor because we are aware of our weaknesses. We become aware of how vulnerable we are. We are nothing without God. We see ourselves as we are. We are not Christ. We can hope to see ourselves as becoming one with Christ. St. Teresa of Avila wrote about becoming one with Christ. Christ has no body. Christ has no body but yours. No hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes with which he looks with compassion on this world. Yours are the feet with which he walks to do good. Yours are the hands with which he blesses the world. Yours are the hands, yours are the feet, yours are the eyes. You are his body. Being Christ calls us to consider the vulnerable, the poor, the weak, those who are desperate, those who are struggling. It is natural to think of service as better if we do many great things that have a big impact on many people, but that's not how Jesus sees it. Jesus calls us to be the least of all and the servant of all, but how? We can start with our own families. People we live with or people we are close to may be in some way struggling. We can help them. We can be helpful in our own community. Now that the economy is struggling to improve in the pandemic, many businesses are starting to reopen and expand. New workers are everywhere. When we shop or use many services, many of the people there to help us are new at their jobs. We can be patient, kind, thankful, and respectful to them. What makes us servants? It is our willingness to welcome Jesus, no matter how he comes to us. Not too long ago in the traffic, I was following a car, and in front of me, it had a little sticker on the back of it, and it said, "Do you get this close to Jesus?" It makes us stop and think how close we come to Jesus. We can become servants when we spend time with a child or any vulnerable person. When we imitate the humility of Jesus, we are servants. When we imitate the compassion of Jesus, we are servants. We can pray that Jesus gives us the heart of a servant. It is a heart of love. May God continue to bless us.